How Trump helped the racists snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. One of the most subtly telling lines in Vice News' exceptional documentation of the events in Charlottesville last weekend came when correspondent Elle Reeve described the rationale behind gathering neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan and other white nationalist groups in the first place. They're supposedly here to protest the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee, Reeve explained. But they're really here to show that they're more than an internet meme, that they're a big, real presence that can organize in physical space. There was certainly an element of the original protest that might have been seen at other Klan rallies in the recent past. It's not new for a group of racists to gather together and demonstrate. What was unusual was the scale and the demographics. Scores of young white men who had been espousing racist and violent opinions from the dark safety of online anonymity were encouraged to take to the streets. It was a sort of first date for hundreds of people who had been flirting with hate on the web for years. In the Vice coverage you can see the giddy initial moments of that coming out. The often play-acted ferocity and the grinning shouts of racist or homophobic slurs. Some of those who'd engaged in this behavior online may have convinced themselves that it was largely insincere, just a way for a young guy to be a nonconformist in 2017. Once you're carrying a Nazi flag and yelling at other people in the street, though, that's a hard argument to make. That lesson dawned on a number of the protesters quite quickly. As New York Magazine's Brian Feldman noted in a piece on Monday. Consider the words of college student Peter Kvjatanovic, a picture of whom, mid-shout while holding a tiki torch, circulated widely on social media this weekend. I hope that the people sharing the photo are willing to listen, that I'm not the angry racist they see in that photo, he told news station KTVN. Despite having traveled to Charlottesville specifically to protect the legacy of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. In the real world, it's not just talk anymore. Kvjatanovic was not the only one to realize that his racist comments weren't going to go unchallenged when he said them out loud in public. On the day of the protest and the days that followed, we saw a number of similar examples. Recognizable faces who had been agitating people online for months recanted or downplayed the violence that's inherent in the push for an all-white nation. Some lost jobs. The racist at the center of Reeve's report filmed a teary explanation for why he wasn't the bad guy. Despite all the guns he carried and his insistence that he wanted to be prepared for violence that he thought was justified. One pro-Nazi protester stripped off his shirt, identifying him as a member of Vanguard America when challenged by counter-protesters. The racist, who was arrested for ramming his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing Heather Heyer, was filmed participating with the same group. The shirtless man later explained to a journalist that he was only barely into white nationalism. It's kind of a fun idea, just being able to say white power, you know, he said. Maybe on 4chan or Twitter, not in the street. The events of the weekend also did significant damage in other ways. The protests and Heyer's death injected new energy into the effort to tear down monuments to the Confederacy. The city of Baltimore removed 4 statues in the middle of the night. Birmingham, Alabama, barred from removing a prominent statue, instead covered it with plywood. Even Richmond, capital of the Confederacy, will review the presence of Confederate memorials on its famous Monument Avenue. More directly, the racists suddenly found that their online safe spaces were no longer that safe. The domain registrar for Daily Stormer, one of the most prominent neo-Nazi sites, booted its registration. It moved to Google. Google did the same. The Stormer finally found a home at a Russian domain host, after trying a few other hosts. But then Cloudflare, a group that helps websites defend against digital attacks, dropped its protection of the site, leaving it open to attacks that repeatedly took it offline. A slew of other online hosts cut other services. Discord, which had hosted Nazi chat rooms, shut them down. Online payment systems kicked the Nazis out. In all, something of a debacle. Sure, the efforts got a lot of media attention, but that transition from online to the big, real-world presence severely undercut their ability to communicate and left a number of participants facing significant legal or personal tribulations. Being a Nazi in a chat room may have seemed safe and powerful. Being a Nazi in the street carried a lot more risk. And then President Trump gave his Tuesday news conference. There, He equated the political efforts of the Nazis and Klan members with those in Charlottesville to oppose them in a way that we haven't seen from an American president in perhaps a century. Trump made clear that, while he had offered the expected words of condemnation against those groups broadly, he considered their political ideals a natural part of the national debate. The White House scrambled to downplay the president's comments, but the white nationalists understood that they'd been given a gift. "I love this man," one told Reeve by text message on Tuesday night. "He has our back." For those racists dipping their toes into the public world, then, the protest did have a silver lining.